The global economic recovery is still continuing, and we are all here for that. We can agree that the fault lines opened by COVID-19 are looking more persistent. Near-term divergences are expected to leave lasting imprints on medium-term performances. Now, the global economy is projected to grow 5.9% in 2021 and 4.9% in 2022. According to the World Bank, Kenya's economy has demonstrated resilience to the COVID-19 shock, with the output in the first half of the year rising above pandemic levels. With this, we have a panel coming to discuss on the topic of post-COVID country economic outlook. Carol Odero, the editor-in-chief at CIO Africa.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Shiro. I'm glad that you talked about the resilience of the Kenyan economy, because that's one of the things that I've been wondering if it is actually going to happen. And the person who's going to talk to us about this, the people who are going to tell us about this, are the panelists who are coming next. I'd like to introduce to you Kevin, James, and Kwame. Please introduce yourself. I'll start with you, James.
Thank you very much. As clearly as you've asked, I'm glad to be in this conversation, and more importantly, that you can be able to share insights on the economic growth, and also learn from peer and fellow panelists on their different perspectives on how post-COVID economic recovery affects women economic empowerment. Thank you.
I'm Kwame Owino. I work at the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is a think tank. I expect that today we'll explore, I think we'll re-emphasize the importance of women economic empowerment to Kenya's growth. I think it's part of the solution for transcending the challenges that come with COVID, and also to look at what extent government is going to meet women, or what kind of ensure that women's economic empowerment is not just strengthened, and women have the momentum behind them is sustained for the longer term. Thank you.
Good morning once more, everyone, and the fellow panelists. My name is Kevin Bwire. I work as a program officer at Bwire-TISA. And my expectation for this forum is just to have a discourse on the economic outlook post-COVID, vis-a-vis how that affects women, and also to learn from participants and panelists to see how best what we can do through synergies to ensure the sustainable impact of our efforts towards women economic empowerment and inclusion. Thank you.
I have to say that when it comes to the economy, what is the state of the Kenyan economy? And we have had the president talk about all these things that happened during his presidency. But how realistic was this economic interpretation? And where do women fit? Because when there is an economic downturn, it is women who normally struggle, especially because they run the micro and small businesses. And what the government has in place, are the activities, programs, and funds functional for women? So I would have to ask you guys to tell me this, because I don't have insight on it. What is the post-COVID country growth forecast for 2022? And are we even likely to achieve it? Or are we just dreaming about the possibility of achieving it? I'll start with you, Kwame.
All right, thanks. Well, if you look at the reported figures for what the growth will be this year, the government of Kenya, all the arms of government are reporting, obviously starting with the Treasury, the central bank as well, are reporting that the momentum is actually behind. So basically it's pushing forward because the last 2 years have been bad. 2020 for obvious reasons because of COVID. 2021 when the vaccination started, I think by that time we all had learned how to manage and to avoid infections. And with vaccinations going ahead, the opening up of the economy came to full swing towards the end of the year. And so for this year, there's an expectation that growth will be close to 5%, possibly touch 6% of GDP per year. It looks too rosy, but it also depends on a lot of things maintained. Among those that I think are quite significant risks is the fact that many Kenyans and businesses depend on farmers and farming activity. The rains towards the end of last year and towards the beginning of this year have not been so good. And when that happens, obviously you see the kind of pressure that we are seeing now in inflation and the prices of food. So that's something that we need to examine. But it's suggesting to me that an expectation of about 6% growth seems too rosy. If you look at global affairs as well, with the pressure coming out of the prices of petroleum, but also the possibility of conflict or tensions between Russia and how that might affect the rest of the globe, we should be circumspect. But definitely what's clear is that this year is going to be stronger than what was last year, regardless of what the election's outcome is, and I'm thinking it'll run fairly quickly and fairly. So all that all that put together, yes, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Kwame, what do you think, James? Do you think that you're likely to achieve this forecast that we have for 2022? And what do you think it takes for us to get there? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. The numbers as reported, and to say like Kwame, we're looking at around 5.73% as reported by National Treasury and the rest of the bodies. And this is an election year. So realistically, what we have seen is that, real GDP growth, decreased from 4.6% in 2012 to 3.8%, and it's because everyone, including businesses, we are cautiously optimistic when you look at those numbers. So first of all, the government has to provide high-level assurances that the electoral process won't disrupt the normal way of doing business. And this is also unstated. We'll also look at it contextually that those numbers, that 5.7 or touch 6% to say so, being heavily optimistic, would indicate that we are also ruling out a possibility that we won't have another wave of COVID, because if that comes and then affects the whole dynamics, and we know the world all over, we are opening up, but it also has a significant impact, for example, on our health, our very weak health system, public health system. So that that affects how that moves. So attributing the fear of violence that scares investors, that's one thing. And so realistically, the economy will not grow with that 5.73% 2022. And because we have also not recovered from the COVID-19 and adverse effects of flood, drought, and floods. And of course, we saw yesterday, the president flagging off relief food. So those, if you look at those scenarios, then the economy is not likely to grow to those numbers, and definitely would look at those numbers in the coming years from a very realistic point of view. Thank you.
Well, aside from the fact that there's a lot of things that are working against us, is there anything working in our favor when it comes to raising the economic levels? Do we have anything to look forward to, or what is the optimism even based on?
Yeah, of course, the optimism, I mean, we saw KRA saying the numbers that they've raised tax numbers, that 7 months tax correction has hit over $1 trillion, and which is more than the anticipated. And that means, of course, that it's based on the fact that the economies globally are opening up, and we have to ask, from which sources are these revenues being corrected. So, we need to interrogate that data and ask, is it that we are looking at the tax amnesty program that and voluntary disclosure, that's where we are correcting money from, and not actual production within the economy? And if it is actual production within the economy that's generating these taxes, then where are these taxes coming from? Of course, we remain a very optimistic population as a country, hardworking Kenyans, and we are paying taxes. But also, significantly, we've got to ask, if it's central bank reporting on the credit growth to the private sector has improved, and high level of optimism by the CEO's survey conducted by the Central Bank of Kenya. So those are factors, meaning that we're looking at the growth. There is optimism, general optimism from the public that the economy is growing and opening up as a result of global trends with regards to how the economies are opening up, during this COVID period. Thank you.
Kevin, are you cautiously optimistic or are you pragmatic about this whole thing? Please switch on your camera, Kevin, so we can hear from you. Are you cautiously optimistic or you are realistic and pragmatic?
I'm cautiously optimistic, and the reasons are we can just take maybe a dive back. When COVID started in January, we had economies contract by 0.4% from 1st of January to June 2020. And we can compare that to the previous year, where we posted a 5.4% economic growth. So now, based on the figures, I feel with the situation, in as much as the charts burden is getting harder for Kenyans, I can also say I'm optimistic.
Okay, all right. So the government has announced planned cuts as a result of fiscal consolidation. What are the implications to growth, and how can women organize themselves economically? Where do they fit in? Yeah, I can see you nodding, so that clearly you have something to say. Yes, go ahead. James. Are you on mute? Yeah, there you go.
Okay. All right. I think first of all we have to look at when the government talks about fiscal consolidation, that implication means that there is less money in supply because a lot of cuts have to happen. So we have to look at it and see that an increase in fiscal deficit, when there is a gap and we have to borrow, it means of course there is corresponding increase in GDP, the economic growth, because then it's money being put to support the economy in one way or the other. And however, government, fiscal consolidation means that then there is a cut in the supply of money. Yeah. And that cut in supply of money reduces, means there's decrease in money supply, consumer demand, and of course, consequently, levels of investment. But potentially we would ask ourselves, what can women do to organize in such times of fiscal consolidation? What would how can women organize economically? One thing I would think, for example, is that there's an opportunity for women enhancing their capacity with regards to women associations at business level. I probably, if we look at data clearly, we would probably think that women business associations are still far below rank, and who benefits from government subsidies is major corporations, and are they owned by women? That's a question to ask ourselves, and that presents an opportunity for women to organize economically. And of course, the affirmative actions that government deploy have to be closely monitored on who exactly is the ultimate beneficiary. And that would also look at then as looking at laws and regulations that facilitate women access to financial assistance, including credit. And for example, like the recently proposed the credit guarantee scheme. How then do women get to be beneficiaries of the credit guarantee scheme? And I think probably I would pick it at that. Thank you.
So how would women organize themselves as one body and then come and look at what government is offering? Because if they're organizing themselves economically, they need something of a foundation or a leader in order for them to do this and achieve it. Kwame, what about you? What do you think?
Okay, well, I think to brush on that a little bit, fiscal consolidation doesn't necessarily mean the government won't spend. I think what it means is that government is going to limit its expenditure to within its means, basically, meaning that you just consolidate within what is available and reducing big deficits. Now, what that means for women might be, they could be good and bad. I think the good part is that if government must prioritize, then it puts women an opportunity to say, look, these are the businesses that government needs to deal with, and these are the businesses that need the kind of services that government provides, which enable us in turn to provide. So if government concentrates on the core functions of government, because if that's what fiscal consolidation means, then it actually helps women because it helps businesses generally. So that's the first. The second thing is that fiscal consolidation means government avoids borrowing. And borrowing that is not well spent has the effect of raising the taxes in the future. So in a way, women and even men, everybody else benefits from government living within its means, because it means you're not having all your value already taxed and government committing taxes into the future for your income to a tax before that. So it's a sensible thing. What I fear about fiscal consolidation is that government is already struggling with the payment of certain bills that were already procured, things that were procured and services that are provided. provided. What happens in a condition such as this is that you find that people who have access to government are probably going to be the ones who are prioritized in terms of payments for provisions. And unless women have political power, for instance, or unless they have influence within ministries or departments that pay, then that might actually affect them adversely. So you think about things such as access to government procurement, where 30% is supposed to be provided to quote unquote excluded groups, including women, youth, and people with disabilities. It is possible that if government departments have to reduce their payments, then they might, knowing the way these things are done, the sequence of payments might actually exclude these groups further and marginalize them in terms of payments, creating stress within those businesses because they have payments to make and the money might not come with that. So it's a balanced picture one way or the other. So what might women do? I think one of the things that women might do, whether through a consolidated group, but in general, is to ask government, one, we have an interest in a government that lives within its means. Two, a government that pays its bills and pays its bills on time. There are laws in parliament today where members of parliament are also supported by women legislators asking private businesses to pay smaller micro enterprises on time, which is a good thing. Which is a good thing. Though I think that it should be determined by contracts between payer and supplier and demander. On the other hand, there should be specific obligations on the public sector specific to actually procure goods and to pay for them on time. Because to make sure that a payment comes 2 years later, even if I have affirmative action funds, does not help a business that's under distress, especially because of the serious consequences of COVID. Yeah.
So what I'm getting is that in order for women to succeed economically, they also need to be involved politically. Otherwise, they can't really push for themselves if they're not involved in politics. Okay, that's an interesting perspective. What about you, Kevin? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And just touching based on the fiscal consolidation program, where we see the government is just increasing the tax revenues, whereas it has a mandate to ensure that it safeguards resources meant to safeguard the plight of the vulnerable groups like women. And we're seeing opportunities like access to government procurement opportunities. So currently as TISA, we are doing a study on growth and the economic well-being of women, supported by DRC. But some of the preliminary findings that are coming out are so problematic to an extent. Women don't even have awareness, they don't have access, and even payments are not even made in time. And for even women who are benefiting from these opportunities, they're elite women who are either related to people in power, and there's also politicization. So it's actually key for us to ensure that there's a duality between economy and politics, and perhaps you can use the elections agenda to ensure that women are able to also advocate for themselves and see how they can create synergies between the CSOs, the policy implementers, to ensure that there's also a sound and good business environment for their businesses to thrive. Because we've seen their businesses, actually they've affected by 30%, considered when the COVID just started. And that adds to the already existing vulnerability they had before COVID. So unless this is addressed, we might see just a continuous downturn, and this will affect women both economically and politically.
This is making me sad. So the women who are able to get whatever help they need, what are they doing different from those who cannot get access to help? Are they middle-class women? Are they women who are poor and then they find themselves getting support from a body or an NGO? How does it happen, Kevin?
Unfortunately, we're just looking at the duality. We have urban and rural women. So looking at the recent index that has just been launched by UN Women in cooperation with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics and the University of Nairobi, they see that only 53% of women are empowered, and these are urban women, and 7% at rural areas. So we also have those inequality within women. So we shouldn't even have policy. We should also have measures that target women, not just as a homogeneous, but a heterogeneous group, so that those who are empowered, they can mentor the others and then see how best they can also uplift themselves, as opposed to just fighting a systemic system that's only patriarchal to an extent.
It would seem that no matter how much progress we seem to make, women constantly seem to be suffering from access to credit from mainstream banks. So this is quite a challenge for women in business. How do we address this? How do we bring them up to this level where they can actually benefit from credit? Yes, Kevin.
Okay, so we've seen the setup for the credit guarantee scheme, and this was just a scheme deposited with the banks to ensure that the women and youth and persons with disabilities can actually access these loans to service their tenders. But we've seen the uptake is really low. We need to ask ourselves why is that the case? So the issue could be the lack collateral, others lack even knowledge to go about it, and perhaps may just need a robust campaign to ensure we raise awareness amongst women, and then we also reach those banks to ensure they come up with a more reasonable collaterals so that they can accommodate women on need basis, as opposed to just being rigid in terms of looking for collaterals.
Well, Kwame, what do you think? I mean, the more women are rising, the more they still can't get access to credit. And I would imagine that at this point, it should be an issue with the mainstream banks, especially since a lot of them have programs that are helping promote women. Why is this still a challenge?
I mean, it's a little bit of a mystery, but I think it's something to do with, as Kevin has suggested, many banks, not all, but many banks haven't understood that the nature of businesses in Kenya, in general, are small businesses. They need very flexible forms of financing, and they don't want to wait for too long for a bank manager to make decisions about whether they should receive the money or not. So if they are if they use systems of credit assessment that are probably more suitable for a more highly formalized economy, then that's what happens. And I see for us, the quote unquote, the messaging that we should give them is, look, women businesses are very formidable. They recover very fast, they're very resilient. So if you're not giving women businesses, or rather not allowing for some small businesses generally and women's businesses to be funded, then you're actually losing a big opportunity. So the point here is actually to show them how big an opportunity they're losing, because they're very timid. I think that the Treasury, obviously, and government, by this I'm speaking about the legislature, could do a little bit more to favor government providing services in ways that actually allow women to provide services, to formalize their businesses and that kind of stuff. But I don't agree with the idea that government should be lending money directly to businesses, whether women or not. I think government can actually help by asking them to provide services. By providing services with which it allows them to formalize businesses, and that allows them, because the nature of banking or financing is actually one that should be provided to businesses. So if there are specific banks or specific institutions that are concentrating on women, government could do a little bit more to actually elevate their profile and to ensure that they provide an opportunity, or rather their systems are attuned to the kind of businesses that women run, which tend to be small or middle-sized, but they require a lot of flexibility, which is not a bad thing actually. To have a flexible financing mechanism is actually a good thing, but women pay back. So in a way, it's a loss of banks that think themselves, or institutions that think themselves so serious that they require you to take 90 days filling in forms to be able to receive funding when the opportunity will have passed. So I think it's a mixed picture, to be honest. But the big thing is, whoever is ignoring women's businesses, because they're the majority in the small and micro size, is missing a big opportunity for profitability, but also for sustaining that, because women businesses, it's been studied, tend to be more loyal. They keep the same bankers every now and again, and obviously also have a good payment record.
Okay, I have a few questions from the audience here. One of them is actually quite interesting. So we cannot talk about the economy without discussing the debt burden. There has been speculation that the high taxation is mainly driven by the need to meet our debt obligations. What does this mean for productivity and specifically for women's economic empowerment? How can productivity be incentivized within this high taxation environment? Kwame, I think this goes right to you. Would you like to repeat the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I think the channel through which that comes from, the channel comes in this way. Government spends a lot of money in debt. Then obviously, because it has run a debt, it needs to repay for it. And because it needs to repay for it, because it's under pressure, it has to raise taxes to do that. So it all comes from what government is spending on. And if government is spending money inefficiently, obviously what it does is that money gets wasted. But because it has a debt, that debt comes back to small businesses and people who are working who still have to pay for that. So that's the cycle of it. So yes, the debt question is a big one, and it's going to be with us in Kenya for in my view, the next 5 years, at least for the next 5 years. So that's the thing. What can be done? I think as Kenyans, we also have to agree that we need to bring government back to doing basics. And doing basics are, one, providing the security for women, their businesses, securing contracts, ensuring that people are paid. I don't think government should be in the business of slaughtering cows and selling fruit, like some of the things that is happening here. Providing water, providing those very essential services that nobody else will provide outside government. Now, what that does is it ensures that government money is spent in very critical ways that also actually raise everybody's productivity. Because the productivity gains are there. It's just that government in Kenya is too big. Government can, so for every 100 shillings of value created in the economy, which economists call the gross domestic product, the government of Kenya spends almost 30. It taxes about 20 and then borrows another 10 or so, gets some grants here and there. So that's a lot of money, to be honest. And that value, in my view, should be in the hands of people who are doing businesses. So part of that is actually to just ask ourselves, fiscal consolidation is extremely necessary. Government needs to concentrate on the things that it can do best. And all these other things that are related to businesses, there's no reason for government to be competing with its own people in selling meat and selling fruits and doing all those other things. Allow businesses and citizens to do the business that they want to, because they're prepared to pay the tax. But provide the essential services, those good roads, power, the security of people, basically physical security, especially for women, whether they're trading or in public places, is important. And all those other things that actually are done. So part of it is getting back government to its basics. And it's not a bad thing for government to just do the basic things and allow the rest of the population to figure out what businesses to engage in.
Okay, what do you think, James? Do you agree with this perspective?
Absolutely. And I think, looking at public debt and economic empowerment, we can't rule out that ultimately the government is not incentivizing the economy, then definitely there will be no resources available even for women, economic empowerment. But however, we have to recognize that public debt is our first charge on our, on our budget, on our taxes. So the money comes and we pay off the public debt. Of course, it means there are significantly less resources to be put forward for women, economic empowerment and generally the full economy, and that significantly affects our production as a country. So I definitely agree that public debt has a significant impact on economic growth and economic empowerment of women. Thank you.
What about you, Kelvin? You are part of the Okoa Uchumi campaign, seeking to rein in the government spending and to have more accountability with regards to the economy. When we talk about women's economic empowerment, what, in your opinion, are the prospects?
Yeah, so maybe I can just talk a little bit about the situation of the debt. It actually is a crisis, because if you look at the revenue of the government, yes, the priority goes to settling the debt. Also, you're seeing government competing with other borrowers, be it women in business, to borrow domestically. And the credibility is actually with the government. So if you're competing with the businesses within your territory and you're not providing incentives to ensure even the exports and imports are cheaper or even fair, you're actually crowding the women out of businesses. And this is something we need to look at it. So for women, actually the prospect in terms of how the situation is, it looms gloom, but maybe in the next 5, 6, or 7 years, things might start taking a different trajectory based on the decisions the incoming government will be taking.
Okay. James, I have a question just for you. The concept of Genderlands investing is gaining more popularity. It implies that financial institutions providing credit for businesses ask for gender data around the investments, such as how many women sit on the board of this company or venture. How many women-led businesses do they have in their supply chains as a measure of good investment? What are your thoughts about this?
Well, interesting perspective, because it's numbers. Well, that is, it's a progressive move But just asking for numbers and having, looking at it when there must be deliberate attempt to actualize the numbers and resources to accompany that. I would say it's a progressive move, but it must translate to actual investments, on those numbers, and putting resources that can deliberately empower women and provide them an opportunity to catch up with the rest of the society where they've been left behind.
So can this Genderlands invest in drive economic empowerment for women?
It can drive, but it cannot be looked in isolation.
Okay.
We've got to present that opportunity, in the context of the overall economy, where they fit, and where deliberately, that investment is being made for us to pull them down. But of course, we know how the society looks at it. And the question is the same question I had asked, for example, with regards to subsidy. So government provides subsidies to businesses, but then you ask yourself, where are women-owned businesses that are getting subsidies, and and the question around beneficial ownership, because of course we have seen with access to government procurement opportunities, a lot of women had been used, as flaunts, as proxies, but they are not the deliberate, the beneficial owners of the process. So I think there's an opportunity for that. Thank you.
Oh, okay, good to know this. And what is the current status of women-owned entrepreneurship post-COVID? Do you have any data or any evidence? Any of you can take this. Any evidence or any data? Kwame, do you have any?
Well, no, I know that I've looked at, but I've just looked at, there's the quarterly data that is reissued by the National Bureau of Statistics regarding employment in Kenya. And one of the things that it confirmed is, I think the suspicion that everybody has had that because of the closure, especially in 2020, women businesses and services in general, because services tend to involve personal contact, which was one of the things that COVID, the virus was very hostile. So women businesses suffered in that at that time, because many of the businesses, whether it's a supply of services, personal services, or whether it's a supply of food and stuff like that. So with that kind of contact being made unavailable, or rather impossible or reduced substantially, those businesses shrank quite a bit. All businesses are recovering, but the businesses, especially the smaller ones, and especially because government was late in coming up with the credit guarantee scheme, or it was not very well designed, did affect it. So there was a shrinkage of businesses. The resilience part, I think, is also showing, because towards the end of last year, when people learned how to be more careful about COVID, treatment was a little better as well, and with vaccination going up, those businesses started to recover once again. So the last half of last year and most of this year will be a recovery year. So we expect those businesses to be. But if you even speak about employment, because employment is also created by those small businesses, some owned by women, employment shrank by about 1.7 million people in one quarter alone. In the first quarter after the lockdowns in Kenya were announced, which was between April and June. That's huge and unprecedented. And that effect obviously has a roll-down effect and has affected other people, both in terms of incomes, but also in terms of the fact that they present demand for the goods and services that are provided by women's businesses. So yes, COVID has had a substantially damaging toll on businesses generally, but also on women's businesses particularly. What we have to be happy about, because we can't control the past, is that the resilience that you see, actually the reestablishment, we're seeing all these things coming back, has been useful, and it's going to be part of the recovery. If these small businesses don't recover, if they suffer another shock, then we'll be in real trouble. But as that recovery takes place, it's clear that with the space, of course, government could do much, much better with the support that is required. Women's businesses and the business environment in general will continue to thrive, to rise rather.
Okay, so going back to the credit guarantee scheme, there was an executive order that the scheme be used to pay for mobile loan defaulters. How many women are among the defaulters? Kwame, this is just for you.
I don't know how many women are among the defaulters, to be honest. I don't know how many women are among the defaulters. I think what was announced was that the credit guarantee, it wasn't that the credit guarantee scheme could be used for payment of defaulters. It was actually to provide some kind of moratorium for referring small loans, or rather those defaulters with small loans, a moratorium for their being cited by the credit reference bureaus. And obviously that is going to wash off over time, but women tend to pay, or rather at least some of the data that has been provided shows that women, generally speaking, tend to pay back their loans. So if they're not paying back, it's just because of the effects of this. That moratorium, in my view, was necessary, and to that extent, I think the president did the right thing, or let me just say the government did the right thing in trying to provide that moratorium, because it was, even if you insisted on it being paid, people were not paying because they were trying to dodge. They were not paying because circumstances were such that the businesses were actually not rolling money, and there's no demand to enable them to pay for that. So that kind of moratorium is necessary, and it's actually defensible from an economic standpoint.
All right, thank you. So have stakeholders, including the government of Kenya, done enough for women-owned businesses against existing and emerging threats? What do you think, James? Have they done enough?
Thank you very much. And probably I would also pick up on the previous question you had asked on data. If you look at the World Bank economic update for 2021, 2 million people were thrown into poverty, and the majority of them being women, as per the data. But also wage workers, especially women, still face employment, reduction in employment, including the number of working hours. And overall decline was 23%, and women faced a greater decline at 30%. That's according to Kenya Economic Update 2021. Now, there are several initiatives that have been spearheaded by government to cushion women against emerging threats. Of course, trying to increase liquidity into the market through, let's say, the Women Economic, the Women Economic Empowerment Enterprise Fund, expanding cash transfers and credit guarantee schemes, and of course the economic stimulus program. But there's much more potential, I think, could be done. Increasing budgetary allocations and being deliberate for women financial inclusion is key, and women economic empowerment and women economic correctives in the sector allocations. I think if the government picked up on that potentially and the sector, and we looked at, for example, at trade, and also recognizing that the KNBS and micro and small enterprises survey of 2016 indicated that 60% of women businesses are unlicensed. I mean, in 2016, we need to check whether that has progressively improved, because then, as part of, even for government resources or private banks resources, for women to access those resources, they require some bits of formality. And so we need to pick up on that as part of deliberate asking government, what are they doing to ensure that women are able to register, ease of registering businesses, And of course, we know there's that progress has been there, on e-citizen, you can walk, you can try and log in, but also how many women are able to access that e-citizen and be able to register their business, to formalize their business so that they can be able to access that credit facility. Thank you.
Okay, what about you, Kevin? Is Okoa, Uchumi and TISA doing much to actually buffer the women entrepreneurs? Are you working with government on this?
Yes, so there have been quite a number of provisions, and we can just center around the credit guarantee scheme. Looking at the KBA report last year, they say the uptake was 5%. And we need to understand why this is not happening. And also, early this age was 0.04%. So I feel like more is there to be done, just to ensure, in as much as this credit scheme is available, why are women not getting that? And one of them could be maybe just the need to address the high demands for compliance from either banks or those entities that are issuing out tenders, like the county governments. If you look at the AGPO, for instance, a woman business, one has to pay $500, which is 50,000 Kenya shillings, to renew their license every 2 years. And most of these businesses cannot even afford to do that. So perhaps we need to retreat those ones and then just see that there are provisions in place that still speak to the sanctity of these affirmative actions towards women.
So now that we are here where we are, post-COVID, if we can at all say it's post-COVID, what kind of strategies and implementation of progressive economic policy are there for women's economic emancipation? Do you have any working as as TISA or as Okoa Uchumi? Any recommendations at all?
As TISA, at the moment, you are just doing a study that we seek to ensure women-led businesses are able to also get the 70%, the high-value tenders, as opposed to the 30% reservation, which is AGCO. And we are trying to look at the barriers within the process and the solutions that can help women access those opportunities. Because historically, we've seen that women normally tend to pursue opportunities that within the milk and just providing service, as opposed to venturing into health, heavy agriculture, and also infrastructure. So these are the opportunities we're trying to see, and then at the end of the study, we can recommend, because it's a global study. We intend to have both national, county level, regional, and even global recommendations to see how best we can activate women for them to be able to realize ultimate economic empowerment.
Do you have any leakage, any ideas on what this survey might bring? Any possibilities?
Ideally, there is the things that are coming out are just the perennial ones. If you do a desk review, you find all those challenges. Now the task is not on the barriers. We just need to look at the solution and perhaps might have convenings in the coming years, in the coming months, where we can have the policy people, the academia, CSOs, women in businesses, just to brainstorm on how best we can tailor solutions addressing these challenges, because it's more complex. It's not something that one organization can sit down and come out or even try to prescribe, but we need just to have that concerted effort to see how best we can go forward.
All right, good. Kwame, what do you think? What do you anticipate?
Well, I think the question is, has GOK done enough to empower women-owned businesses, even within COVID? Because one of the things that standard economics accepts is when you have a shock like what happened in 2020 and most of last year because of COVID, a stimulus package is necessary. So I think the government could have designed a stimulus package, because there's been a stimulus package. The government is investing in infrastructure and all those other places. But a stimulus package could have been designed in areas in which women have greater participation in terms of the labor. So obviously stuff such as, in areas such as basically education. Why? There are women teachers in agriculture, women are farmers, trying to build opportunities within markets, even with the risks of COVID and keeping people safe and all those other places. And obviously just in public healthcare as well, because that was a big area. Now these are areas in which women have participation, but also women businesses can actually supply one or two of these other things. A better design for the stimulus package, because government spent quite a lot of money on it, close to 60 billion, would have ensured that women businesses would be strengthened, obviously. I think, however, that the COVID vaccination, and I mean, this might be controversial, but the COVID vaccination was a significant stimulus package because it prevented people from getting unwell. The numbers have shown that women have been more reluctant in Kenya. There's been a difference. Whatever that might be, my view is that a stimulus package, a COVID vaccination with safe vaccines are helpful, because often, whenever family members became unwell, it is women who are actually having to take care of them. So to the extent that men are going for it, it's okay. I mean, I'm okay with that. Let women make decisions about whether they want the vaccine or not. But a vaccine program is useful because then it releases the hands of women from actually having to be primary carers. And that tends to mean that they cannot then work outside the home or actually earn their money or run their business. And then that then has a double shock on the household, on women's income particularly. So a better designed stimulus program, and of course the stimulus program is going on. So if it is focused on these areas in which it has the greatest output for women businesses and women in general, and helps them to actually earn more income, that will be supported. So yes, we need to put our heads around thinking about whatever stimulus program government continues to execute, that it is sensitive to the fact that not every sector of the economy is equal, or rather has the same effect on women enterprises and women as income earners.
James, what would be in your stimulus package?
Oh, interesting. So first of all, in my stimulus package, today was given the opportunity to design that, would be to look at the healthcare system, and we have a lot of women, for example, who would we would definitely say we want to fix the healthcare system, and that will present a good opportunity for women to ensure that the healthcare system is responsive enough when they need the healthcare system. The other thing would be in agriculture, because we know a lot of small scale holders, small scale holders of farmers are women. Primarily, few women probably own ranches, big farms, and so if we want to look at deliberately and say, when we give fertilizer subsidy, where does that fertilizer subsidy go? Who benefits from that? So those are two critical sectors I think I would look at it, and of course also in business, and because that also leads me. Looking where we are in a transition period as we go to the next medium-term plan, the MT4 2023-2027, and the county integrated development plans, where we have to be deliberate on women economic empowerment. We have to, women need to organize around them so that they can be able to demand that inclusion, and they can also use that as a basis of assessing governments in the next 5 years, and when they come to make the right decisions while voting. Thank you.
Okay, so as we wind up, I would like each of you to just give me a very brief perspective on how to support women's economic empowerment in a post-COVID world and in an election year. What can we practically, and I mean practically, push for and get women onto the road to economic empowerment? What realistic plans can you have in mind this year?
Should I go first?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, first. Unlike many Kenyans, I don't believe that an elections year is supposed to be peculiar. I think women, men, human beings matter regardless of whether it's an elections year or not. But I think going back to your point, it would be this. If you want women empowerment in many ways, the government of Kenya has something that's called the cash transfers. And those cash transfers are given on the basis of certain vulnerabilities. I think because they've been given, well, there's some problem about the transparency around it. I would design a cash transfer system that is focused on women-headed households. Why? Because women-headed households tend to have the burden of actually caring for children, other family members. And if you provide it to women, whether they invest it in household services or other household consumption services, whether it's the food that's available, and it actually helps society. So if you focus it on that way, taking advantage of the fact that in Kenya, specifically in rural areas and some parts of poorer urban areas, women I would have a subsidy that is, and that would be a stimulus as well. Just basically identify, like has been identified, the data is available from the National Bureau of Statistics. They have a given profile, and you say that all women-headed households with an income above or below 10,000 shillings per month, for instance, or even lower, because it tends to be lower, will receive this grant from government for a given period and pushing that money to have a fantastic effect on securing women's against vulnerability, whether it's about food, whether it's about work, but it will also help them to actually have more resources to invest in their businesses. It doesn't have to be full-time, but it's something that can actually be useful in an elections year, but also more importantly in a year such as this, when you're going to have a double shock of failed rains, and failed rains this year again, which is going to create a lot of food inflation, which is something that also falls heavily as a burden on women. Thank you.
Okay, from your lips to God's ears, the elections will be fine, we will be fine. James, what are your last words?
My last words would be, to mention that women should be very deliberate in organizing around economic empowerment, policies. I think this conversation should not be left just, what we consider elite. There should be, this conversation that we're having here, where Clown Trust is organizing with other partners. This should be a conversation that should be pursued, to ensure that there is, we do a lot of, we do good planning, but we need to do better budgeting of the plans we do. So we have very brilliant, policies and plans around women economic empowerment, women financial inclusion. But then we need to ask ourselves, are we doing better budgeting for those policies so that we're not leaving women behind when it comes to allocating resources and being accountable for those resources. Because one thing, for example, would be that the credit guarantee scheme, we need to see much more transparency around that and participation of women. The data is not yet available of what has happened so far, but I think that's something that women need to organize around that question, around public policy. Collectively, they can be able to advance that conversation much stronger. Thank you very much.
Kevin, you're a pragmatist. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so for me, I'll say what we need to do as a country, I break it into two. So first, I'll have a recommendation for fellow CSOs. What we need to do is just to see how best we can include livelihood opportunities in our programming. And by this, I mean, if you have a program that lasts 1 or 2 years, you need to come up with some practical ways how you can incentivize or even ensure that the groups you're working with, they're able to do something on the side that they can make a living out of that. And then as they continue to pursue the social accountability work. Secondly, under the cash transfer program, I feel like it was a well-thought idea and I fully back the rationale behind it. But we need to have a deliberate move to see that there is data verification, to see who are these people that were qualified and whether targeting was done in the right way to ensure that those who are vulnerable were still in the process of ensuring that they target the people. And then there's that sampling framework where it didn't come from someone who's not within the province of that either community. And lastly, I'll say we need just to have a deliberate agenda setting where we encourage various organizations to tailor messaging that speak to women empowerment, economic empowerment. We can even have women political aspirants because it's an electioneering year to have those manifestos because hopefully they might influence the party that might win in the coming elections. So it's agenda setting, ensuring social accountability has livelihood aspect to it, and then all the cash transfer processes are deliberate and they are targeted to an aspect that they speak to the needs of those people who are affected, and they're not proxies who benefit as a result. Thank you. Thank
you very much, gentlemen. That was an hour well spent. I learned quite a bit, and I wish you all a lovely day. And thank you so much for showing up. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from them. When it comes to entrepreneurship and economic empowerment for women, the government does need to step in, but women also need to enable themselves, and they should consolidate their efforts and work together and can charge forward in the way that only they can. So it's funny that they talked about these challenges. When I actually asked about challenges and I read on it, it seemed that women are far more challenged by the absence of role models. So if you're a woman and you're in business or you're an entrepreneur, take someone under your wing and show them how to do it. And make sure that along the way you partner with other women so you can collaborate with the government. That's the best way to do it. In fact, that might be the only way to do it. So thank you so much and have a lovely day.